Hey folks, it's Marvin Cash, the host of The Articulate Fly, and we're back with another On the Salt with Captain David Blinken. David, how are you?
I'm great. It's been a fun couple weeks, and I got to tell you, our last podcast was a blast from Mexico.
Yeah, it's kind of an amazing thing. I was kind of thinking about that after we recorded it, to think about, from when I was a kid where you didn't call Mexico and growing up, you do, person to person phone calls so that you wouldn't get charged for long distance. And we literally were, not only hearing each other, but seeing each other, 2 or 3 time zones away.
I know. It was a lot of fun. And, to have me and Steve, sitting, opposite each other on the table, working off one another was a whole lot of fun.
Yeah. I felt bad for him. I guess he caught COVID on the flight back, right?
Yeah. It's funny. He called me up one day and he said, yeah, I've been a little bit sniffly and, under the weather. And so the next day he calls me up and he's like, I just took a COVID test. I'm going to know shortly. And in the middle of the phone call, he's like, oh, expletive. I've got COVID. I started laughing. I didn't realize he was doing it right there with me on the phone. Anyway, but he's doing fine.
Yeah. And so, the great thing, right, is you were back home for 72 hours and you basically spent the last week and change up on Martha's Vineyard. And from the pictures you shot me, it looks like you did a little bit of fishing.
I did a little bit of fishing, just can't help myself. So I trailered the skiff up there and I took some friends and their kids fishing off the skiff and we were jigging for black sea bass. But after I dropped them off, I ran over to one of my favorite flats out there whose name will remain anonymous unless somebody books me to fish them up there. And literally in the middle of the doldrums, everywhere else, I get to this one spot, I anchor up the boat or I stake it out, and I've got stripers from 25 to 40 inches swimming by the boat for 2 hours. It was just the best.
That's pretty amazing. That's a pretty good combo after, 3 good days of tarpon fishing.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The tarpon fishing was awesome. But I tell you, being able just to stake out in a foot and a half of water and just watch these big critters swimming by was so nice. It's always nice kind of being back in your home waters.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of home waters, coming back to Long Island, what are you seeing out there?
Well, I'll get out there tomorrow, but, we just had a big cold front come through last night, and it looks like we're going to have a pretty stiff northwest wind for the next couple of days. But I can tell you, before I left and while I was gone, we had some bluefin tuna sliding around the south side, pretty close to shore. I know some people were going only like 8-10 miles out and jigging bigger ones up, and they said they were also catchable on stick baits and fly. And really what everyone's waiting for right now, everyone's kind of holding their breath, hoping the false albacore come in. And I got a feeling after the supermoon and then we have this cold front coming through, I'm willing to bet Friday, Saturday, or sometime next week, those false albacore are going to be here. That's usually what happens when we get a front like this.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because, my social media feed kind of being more kind of mid-Atlantic oriented, all the guides are talking about clients that canceled and, get your October, November dates for false albacore off Harker's Island.
Yeah, I mean, they're talking about it. There was a public speaking period that ended today for the preservation of false albacore that the ASGA sent out, and I'm sure you can still write in and do some other things. But we're really working hard now to help preserve the false albacore and protect them from not really overfishing, but from over harvesting. So hopefully the guides, with the help of the Guides Association and other people, they can be convincing for the Mid-Atlantic Commission and get them on board with doing the right thing. They certainly didn't with stripers. Hopefully they will with false albacore, because the false albacore is, considering the stripe, because the striped bass numbers have dropped so much, they've really been what has saved us the past few years in the fall. And if they're gone, a lot of us are going to be out of business.
Got it. And got an interesting question for you too. This time, had someone
Mhm.
reach out on Instagram and wanted to know, how do you fish a bunker pod?
I mean, that's such a wonderful question, and there's so many different ways to do it. But let me go with the tried and true. First of all, you got to think about your fly selection first and foremost, right? And you could tie really big deceivers or really big, bucktail flies, flies that are between, 5 and 8 inches long. A lot of people are now fishing the beast fly or the game changers, really big ones. So you've got your fly selection. Um, and then I tend to fish a much heavier leader in bunker pods, and very often with a shock tip because you never know if it's going to be bluefish or stripers. So I like to fish a mono or a fluorocarbon shock tip of about 60 pound. And then I'll have a couple of different rods rigged. I'll have a floater, an intermediate, and a full sink. Um, because you need to be able to fish different depths to reach the fish that are going to be eating the bunker or the artificial you're using. So very often I'll fish a beast fly or I'll tie one of these huge deceivers out of schlappen that's, could be 6, 8, 10 inches long. And if I'm fishing a 350, I'll usually cast it out, or a 450, I'll usually cast it out and try to get it under the bunker school. And I'll strip it because very often the bluefish and the striped bass are under the bunker schools, kind of hurting them and balling them up. And then they'll run up through them. So if I can get under the bunker school, it'll make it look like one bunker's peeled away. And that's usually a really great thing for the striped bass or the bluefish to whack before they, push into the surface. Um, with a floating line, if they're up on top and they're just busting them, and you'll sometimes see an opening in the bunker school where they'll clear out and you'll see those bigger fish in that opening, kind of going around a circle, chasing down things. That floating line is really helpful because it'll make it look like an injured, bunker that's flopping on top. And you can just throw that there. Very often they'll come up and whack it. Um, and then with an intermediate line, you're just kind of, you know, you know, trying to, you know, get the medium, the best of both worlds. Sometimes they'll be up on top. Sometimes those fish will be kind of in the mid depth. Uh, so, your approach is important, but a lot of fishing these bunker schools is also observation. Like if I see a bunker school get sprayed, I'm not driving in on it right away. I'm gonna sort of hang back and watch and see the pattern of how the fish are feeding on the bunker, whether it's bluefish or stripers or tuna or whatever it is. So I can get an idea of how I want to fish it before I go in. Because if I grab a floating line and they're up on, if I grab a sinking line and most of the feed is on top, I'm kind of like hurting myself and vice versa. So, a big part of fishing, as we all know, is observation. So, have those rods ready to go if you know it's going to happen, or be rigging while you're watching, if it comes to that, and take a couple minutes to see what's going on, and that should lead to a pretty successful outcome, hopefully.
Yeah, it's just like watching a big brown trout eat a dry fly.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah. And the other thing, you're fishing these big flies and it's a bunker school. I definitely would be using a 10 weight for sure. Just easier to throw the bigger stuff. You could use a 9, but if you're throwing a really big schlappen fly or a really big beast fly, it's always nicer to have a little extra oomph with the 10 weight. It just makes life a lot more enjoyable.
Yeah, that's given me musky PTSD where I actually fish like two-handed switch rods because it just makes life so much easier.
Yeah, I don't think I'd go two-handed with bluefish out in the ocean or stripers, but I can see how that would be nice. But you know, I guess with muskie, you guys are using beast flies or game changers too, and those are some of them are close to a foot long, so it's nice to have that kind of leverage.
Yeah, I'll tell you actually the longer butt where it really helps is actually the figure eight.
Yeah,
I find that actually more fatiguing than the casting.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, anytime I'm using a 10 or above, I try to minimize the casting I'm doing anyway, whether it's bluefish, striped bass in a bunker school or whether it's tarpon feeding on mullet. You really want to be keyed in on your target and not just casting wildly at whatever you see, because the more you cast, the more fatigue you can get, and of course adrenaline helps not keep you from fatigue, but you want to be ready for that one shot that's really going to help you capitalize and land a nice fish. So again, watching the water, watching the feeding pattern, so you don't have to be casting 40, 50 times in a certain time period with these bigger rods, 10s or 11s or 12s. It's just, it's not so fun.
Yeah, it's also a bummer to come back to the marina and ask for an orthopedic surgeon referral, right?
Yeah, shoulder surgeons, elbow surgeons. You hear people talk about tennis elbow. I know so many anglers who their casting's a little adjustment and they've got casting elbow. And I'm like, yeah, you gotta maybe put the trunk of your body and your shoulder into it so you're not torquing your elbow so much. That's a whole different set of questions.
Yeah, that'll be next time. And folks, we love questions on the articulate fly. You can email me or DM me. As I always say, we want to make David's life easier. And if we use your question, I will send you some articulate fly swag, and then we're in a drawing for a Royal Wolf line of your choice. And I know you've heard David and I, talk about how much we love Royal Wolf lines. I don't fish the salt stuff, but I do love the triangle taper for trout.
Yeah, well, I like it for saltwater. And what's really interesting, and people are learning this from fishing with me and when I talk to them, is the Royal Wolf Bermuda tapers that I use in saltwater have an incredible temperature range. I use them both tropical and I use them here in the temperate waters of the Northeast. Even into some of the coldest days, they just don't have that memory that other lines very often have, where you have to deal with line getting really kinky or stiff and it just doesn't go through the guides. The Royal Wolves are really forgiving that way. So, I mean, that's one of the primary reasons I love them.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because that's a big deal kind of down here for smallmouth in the summertime. Because, I mean, you really do need a tropical line.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, David, before I let you hop and get back to the Yankees game or watch a little bit more of the DNC, you want to let folks know kind of, where they can find you so they can book you and fish with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, certainly you can go to my website to davidblinken.com or North Flats Guiding, and you can get my phone number right off there and feel free to give me a buzz. They can also find me on Instagram at David Blinken and Facebook. And I'm all over there. And I can also find me on X, so formerly known as Twitter. So and all under my own name. So that should make it easy. No funny acronyms or fishing names. I try to keep it simple.
There you go. Well, listen, folks, as I always say, you owe it to yourself to get out there and catch a few. Tight lines, everybody. Tight lines, David.
Tight lines. Bye, Marvin.